I'm Doug McKenzie.
And I'm John Ward.
And we're the co-hosts of the ABCs of IBC podcast.
Come join us as we share our unique perspective on the infinite banking concept as the creator, Nelson Nash, intended.
Welcome back, Doug. Everybody. Hey, John. Jinxed.
I'm jumping on saying hi because I always hear this, or you can't hear it, but it's the silence. Sometimes when I go and listen to this, when it gets released, it's always like there's a moment of 2 or 3 seconds where there's no sound. There's nobody talking.
We're just taking a moment of silence for our listeners.
Yes, for all those that work so hard and lose so much of their money.
Yes, exactly. And that's what we're going to talk about today, depressingly enough.
Yeah, what a cheerful group. Yeah. All right.
Well, so last week I sent John this snippet from zerohedge.com, which it's a great website if anybody's hasn't had the chance to check out some of what they report on there. But I sent this over to him last week and I said, man, I think we should talk about this. And I'm just going to read you a little snippet that I found that's talking about Social Security. So, in quotation marks, the program's payouts have exceeded revenue since 2010, but the recent past is nowhere near as grim as the future. According to the latest annual report by Social Security trustees, the gap between promised benefits and future payroll tax revenue has reached a staggering $59.8 trillion, not billion, trillion. That gap is
real money, you mean?
Real money. That gap is 6.8 trillion times larger than it was just 1 year earlier. The biggest driver of that move wasn't COVID-19, but rather a lowering of expected fertility over the coming decades. So that means that for me, unless they, change something, Social Security is essentially it's just not feasible. It's not going to be able to pay out unless they pull money from somewhere else, which they very well may do. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. And in doing some research too, many of the largest pension funds in the U.S. are in the same position. And interestingly, it's the main reason is just because there are less younger people paying in to support the older people that are drawing off of those pensions or Social Security and living longer and longer and longer. So, and because these plans were essentially set up so that they were always, robbing Peter to pay Paul. They were never taking people's money and actually allocating it until those people got older. They're always using money earned by younger people to pay older people. But if that balance is off, then the plan is no longer sustainable by itself. And that's kind of scary. To me, that's kind of scary. What do you think, John?
Well, they've been there's so much to say about this. They've been saying this pretty much since I was in my 20s that, hey, I don't even know it's going to be around. It's going to be insolvent by, I think it was, I forget the different years, right? But I remember, thinking about it and going, oh, yeah, that's not going to be available for me. And I hear people saying that all the time now. And of course, these numbers are crazy. And it wasn't 2010 yet when I was hearing it the first time. But the interesting thing is that people are not up in arms about it. But they are in some ways because they feel this need to gamble in the market to make sure they have enough money when they decide to stop working. So there's a lot more risk taking, partly because of the fact that it's not just about, hey, I want to make sure, I keep up with everybody else, but it is, yeah, I don't really suspect that Social Security, regardless of whether they're paying out or not, that money is going to be worth much. Those dollars are going to be worth much. So there's a lot to say, but I want to ask a question. Maybe you shouldn't answer it because it's almost embarrassing in some ways. But so I'll pose it and then I'll give my answer, which is, have you and the listeners ever become part of a multi-level marketing company or network marketing company? And I got the kind of bug on that probably when I was around 12 or 13 because my older brother introduced me to a company called Shackley. I went to a presentation. I was pretty impressed by the presenter. And he looked like he was made of money. And of course, I was thinking, I want to have money someday. So I looked at a lot of different ones over the years, never had any success with them. And now, maybe if somebody hears about a network marketing or multi-level marketing company or opportunity, uh, people would say, "Well, is that one of those pyramid schemes?" And which is always like, that's a scam. The only people that make money are the people that get in early.
Mm.
And really, Social Security is a pyramid scheme. You
Well, and
know,
interestingly, it wasn't supposed to be utilized the way that they've utilized it. They've since used the money for all sorts of things that they never intended to do with the money in the beginning.
yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It has turned into a pyramid scheme, and
And people
those,
aren't saying, hey, and most people are against the pyramid scheme, right? They
yeah,
say, oh, that's thievery. That's, I'm never going to make any money. I'm going to have a bunch of products in my garage, or and I'm going to make, I've spent thousands, but I'm making $22 a month, from sales, because I had to keep buying, so you know, really, this is what's going on. Eventually, the music has to stop. You would think, right?
oh
The
yeah, and
the
that's
people
when
that are
people
paying
that's when
in
people get mad. That's when
yeah,
people
people
actually
paying
freak
in are
out.
not going to get the fruits, right? And
So
similar, yeah,
one thing you said, John, and I just looked this up because I've been hearing this, and I'm obviously not, I'm a lot younger than you, but I've been hearing this since I mean, as far back as I can remember. Oh, Social Security is not tenable, blah, 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 blah. But those numbers that I threw out there, $60 trillion, the gap between tax revenue and future benefits. Do you know what the GDP of the US is?
I do not know, but I would guess it's under 30 trillion for
It is.
sure.
It's around like $27 trillion, 26
Uh,
trillion.
okay.
Okay, so that gap is larger than the GDP of the United States. So I think that this amount that is uncovered essentially has become so ridiculously large to where people were looking and almost seeing that this was going to happen. And I guess the question at some point becomes, how long can this go on for? And I don't know the answer. You don't know the answer. We can speculate, right?
Yep.
But it's kind of scary. And you talked about MLMs. What was the other term that you said?
It's multi or network marketing, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I would argue also that this kind of fits. It kind of fits the description of a Ponzi scheme in a way, right?
Well,
And
yeah, that is the idea of the pyramid, right? In a sense, right?
exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
in a Ponzi scheme, everybody's perfectly happy until they stop getting paid. And
Yep.
nobody seems
Yeah.
to really pay any attention to it. And that's exactly what happened with Bernie Madoff. It was so obvious for decades that there's no way that what he was doing was feasible. And there were people that were shouting from the rooftops about that. There's a great documentary, by the way, on that, if anybody hasn't watched that. And it just was impossible to achieve what he was achieving. And everybody just kind of turned a blind eye because they were happy to receive those consistent payouts until it just suddenly crapped the bed for him. And, I guess where I'm going with this is I'd rather be reliant on something that's, doesn't have a foundation that's made out of sand. And I think you would too, John.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's why I do talk about these permanent dividend whole life paying policies as a way to um, build your retirement um, stream of income, right? That it's not only something you can use throughout your life if you start early enough, but you can use it as your cash flow. And again, my separating or differentiating between income. It's interesting you brought this up because I got pretty excited when I saw a text from you saying this is what you wanted to talk about. Because I just talked to one of my three sisters within the last week, and I met a new person that is 66 and a half, and my sister is 69, and she kind of has a general idea of what I do. We're pretty close, and talked about trying to help her children, or at least one of them, and I've met with them, but I've shared this idea that the whole thing is, end up with no income in retirement, end up with cash flow in these policies. But she did say, like, oh my gosh, I've got to work. Her life situation changed. She had to go back to, outside, get a W-2 income. And she's like, oh my gosh, they're going to tax. I need the money, but now they're going to tax my Social Security. And then I said, and then
Which is the
Medicare.
big
She goes,
scam.
yeah, Medicare too. And it's going to cost me, like, oh my God. And so it's painful to try to get the word out and have, really, it falls on deaf ears. And that's
Yes.
that's what, and please listen to this whole, I don't know where exactly we're going to go, but this is pretty important because once you talk to people that are already of retirement age and they said, I had no idea. And it's like, well, it's out there and you could figure this out, but people just go along with whatever the status quo is, and they don't pay attention. They don't. In fact, this woman that I met, Doug, she says, yeah, I just can't even think about it. I don't really like numbers and money, and so it's like burying your head in the sand while you're working so hard for the money. You might be doing
Mm.
something you love, hopefully you are, but you are still putting in, you're trading your time and energy for this pay. And then, yeah, but I really can't think about like savings or what I should do with it. I'm going to do what everybody else does and what the so-called experts tell us to do. So
Yeah,
it's
and
tough.
and a lot of that might not work out so well. And
No.
and it's a kind of a depressing thought that, and you see a certain amount of your paycheck for most people is going to go to Social Security and Medicare. And I mean, I know I've had, I don't even, I looked at it one time. It was like a depressing amount of money that's been taken from me, to be set aside for me until a later date. And I'm sitting there wondering, am I really going to get that? Am I going to get the full amount? And I know I'm not going to get the full amount because at some point they had the brilliant idea of taxing the money that they've already taxed you on if you make over a certain amount of income, which is got to be one of the biggest scams in the world, right? So if you make over like a ridiculously small amount of annual income, they're going to tax the Social Security payments, which are already a tax that, you know, on income that you had. throughout your life, but they're not going to give you the full amount, and they'll take a pretty significant percentage of that. And so I'm assuming those taxes are probably going to increase in the future, or I don't know, they're going to start to come up with ways to try to mitigate some of this, whether it's, stating that if you have over a certain amount of income, maybe you just don't get Social Security, or you have to wait much, much longer. Who knows? But what I really love is that, life insurance companies, they don't operate like that. They don't rob Peter to pay Paul. They keep assets on the books to cover all liabilities. It is not this, flowing in, paying things now to cover things. It's very secure in how they do things. And I have that option there to cover me in case all these other things that most people rely on fall through. And I feel very secure in knowing that. I know you do too, John.
Yeah, yeah. It's
And they operate with fiscal responsibility. Go figure. And
well,
they
yeah,
have they have organizations that oversee what they're doing, and they're responsible for reporting to those organizations, and the standards are very strict. Um, and so they're not doing risky things, and they're not over leveraging, and they're not taking on risk that they don't want to be taking on, that's going to make them unable to perform.
yeah. I want to go back to Bernie Madoff. Whether you were getting any kind of payout, the Ponzi scheme idea, it's similar to so much about your retirement savings, 401ks, IRAs, that most people are trying not to touch it. And that's the same with all these investments, including with him. People were getting statements, maybe physical, like it through the mail or online, but certainly
No, it
they're.
was all male. You got to watch the documentary, guys, if you
Oh,
haven't.
okay. So you
Yeah,
get
they were
what we're
coming out.
used to is it? Yeah. Go ahead.
I just got to say this really quick, John. Remember way back in the day, the old printers that would print off with the corrugated lines on the side that were like perforated, and you would,
Yep.
peel them off.
Yep.
That's the kind of paper he would send statements out on. Like,
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah.
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 Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, keep going.
And the point is that I was trying to make is that it's on paper. If you're showing growth, unless you're actually experiencing that growth by utilizing the money um, that it represents, then it's just on paper. And so the same goes on with everything pretty much when it comes to retirement savings. People see what they have on paper, but again, we've said many times it doesn't include, whatever the tax rate's going to be for you
Hmm.
when you want to distribute it, and it is sitting out there exposed to these busts that we've had, and we've had a bunch of them, um, over the last 20, 25 years. But even more so, throughout my lifetime, we've had multiples. And people would say, yeah, but look at it, always bounced back. Well, go and talk to some people, go do some research on those that were close to retirement age or in retirement when these things happened and they had money in the market. And the same story came up with my sister last week, that she was talking about a friend whose parents, did pretty well and retired in their 50s, but the daughter of these parents said, they've always been concerned, like they've been really conservative, which means that they almost are still enslaved by this system, that they feel like they can't really spend, they can't really live with the money that they support, because they're afraid they're going to run out of money, and they don't know how to actually make it last. And we can show you in these policies, not a guarantee, but we can give you the facts that it's likely to last as long as the software will show, and that's not what you're going to find. And then these dollars in the policy do not get included in these numbers you talked about being super low. Social Security right now, I didn't look recently, but in the last few years, and it may have changed slightly, but 26,000 for a single person and 36,000, not double if you're married, is the threshold before some of that money is taxed. In the first, let's say
Yeah, it's
as a
like
single,
living at a poverty level, right?
yeah, well,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
that's the thing.
who wants to live on 30,000? I mean, I'm sorry, but who wants to live on $30,000 a year?
Well, the fact is, let's say it was 30,000 and it's 26 is the threshold. That 4,000 over the 26 is taxable at 50% of it is taxable.
Right. Sorry, I should say who wants to live at $26,000 a year? I was right, but that's
Yeah, yeah, no, that's
that's I
fine.
mean,
It's all the same.
that's a staggeringly low amount of income to be considered the threshold at which, you're exempt from taxes. But interestingly, I will point out that if you are, one of the rare people that has set it up so the majority or all of your money is in whole life insurance policies at that point, you could be streaming out six figures in income from the policies and pay zero in social security taxes, which I always think is pretty cool
Yeah,
because none of
yeah.
it counts as income.
Exactly. So you aren't making any more than what the Social Security is. And I can say for most people, their Social Security is lower than this 26 and this 36. So, well, as a couple, it probably goes over the 36, right? Which is really sad because, they really push this idea of family and marriages. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. It's been really good in many ways, but and the fact that if you filed jointly, there was some benefits, right? And now on the back end of your life, it's actually a negative to be married.
Mm-hmm.
Protect, when it comes to whether they're going to tax you or not. The other thing is that I've looked into is how few people actually can even reach the maximum allowed, which in 2024 is for an individual in their 401k is 23,000. There was two studies that I looked into. I think one was in 2016 and one in 2019, and they may have done one since, but only 13% of those that had access to a 401k were actually maxing it out. In both studies, it came
Well,
out to 13%.
John, you know what the average income was per person in the US in 2023?
69,000.
No, $38,000.
38?
So per person. So household, it's, let's see, average household, you're around 74,000. So
Okay,
how in
yeah.
the world is someone with housing, food, transportation, all these other costs going to put in on average over $20,000 a year into their 401k plan, money that they can't touch for decades? That's, it's completely unfeasible for most people. And of course, when you look at the income that we just mentioned, that's pre-tax, so people aren't seeing a good chunk of that, you know. Um, so
Well,
yeah,
and I think that was, yeah, that's the key, right? Is that you can't touch it. I
you can't
mean,
touch it. Yeah,
without penalties, right? Without cost. And so yeah, you're not going to put that away because you need the cash flow. You need to do things in your life, and you're like, I'll do up to the match amount, right? Whatever amount I have to put in so I get this match. But no, I can't give up 23 if I'm making as a household and that's like per individual. They'll let you
per
put
individual,
23.
right? So you're obviously not
Yeah.
going to be paying $46,000 with a
Right.
household that's making 74 pre-taxes, right? Probably making 58 after taxes. There's no way.
Yeah. And then
Um, unless
they
you're
have
living
this,
in your parents' basement, right? There's no way.
yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah. Which, you might do.
Right.
Um,
It's a good financial plan sometimes these days.
yeah. Well, and then they have this catch up thing where you can put in more if you're over 50 years old. And I always say, like, okay, first of all, we all know the earlier you start to save, the compounding that would happen over the long haul, you'd want to get more money in earlier because the reason you're catching up is because you don't have as much time for that to work for you, right? And it's almost like backwards, right? You should really live in your parents' basement as long as they let you and start socking the money away. And we
Mm.
recommend you put it into a permanent whole life policy. And then as time goes on, you get to start really, hey, mom and dad, I'm moving out. I'm 40 now. I'm going to move out.
Well, because you have full access to it right off the
Yeah.
bat, right? And
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it. John, I just want to I while you were talking before, I signed on to my social security.gov account because I was like,
Yeah.
man, I want to know how much money I've paid into social security. And I'm not 40 yet, right? And I won't give an exact amount, but well into six figures has been paid into social security by me.
Just Social
Medic
Security.
just
Yeah.
social security. Medicare is, obviously a lot less than that, but still a pretty significant amount. Um, I'd
Wow.
certainly like to see that money one
Yeah.
day. I
Yeah.
mean, that makes
Well,
me up. At least maybe I'm paying for you, John, so that makes me
yeah, I
feel
was going to
better.
say, because I'm going to start collecting soon.
Yeah, I'm
So,
thank. Oh,
yeah,
good. I
thank
got
you,
you
Doug.
covered then. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
thank you, Doug.
welcome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
when
no
you
problem.
hear about all the good things I'm doing, having lunch with a friend and all that kind of stuff, that I can thank you for that. So you and all the others. So thank you everyone for contributing.
But in
Um,
all seriousness, what I wanted to address with this episode today is that this quote that I mentioned, that disparity between what they have to pay out and income that's coming in is truly scary. And I have a lot of friends. Some of them are older that have pensions, and they feel very secure in those. And I would challenge people to go look at how secure are those pensions. Some pensions are doing fine, and a lot of pensions that haven't performed as expected and don't have as much money coming in, or a lot of pensions don't have new contributions coming in anymore. A lot of those are on very tenuous footing, right?
yep.
And we're here to help people secure their financial future, truly. From day one of having a policy out until they want to go sit on the beach somewhere or do whatever they want, right? We're here to set people up with a system that's not going to fail them like that down the road.
Yep. And I would say, if people are thinking about doing a catch up or if their employer makes a deal with them, or I shouldn't say and it does, they want to give them more money towards their retirement because they can provide more than they do in as a match. Maybe they want to help you out, but let's just say you're doing the catch up, which I think is like, $6,000 a year. You might as well start putting that into some of that or all of it into a whole life policy, because at least that when you're ready to retire, that money is going to be tax free, tax exempt. I mean, you're going
Mm-hmm.
to and it's not going to be part of this equation, that provisional income equation that shows whether you're going to owe Social Security tax or that you're going to pay a higher rate for Medicare. Because some people can pay like $150 a month for Medicare, and some are paying $450. And when I say that, to people, they go that are retired, they go, yeah, like that's how they react. They just go and talk to them about it. Somebody that that's already retired and how this has worked out for them. Maybe a few people, interview them, so to speak, your friends, your family members, and you'll find, wow, that's what's coming my way, and this isn't working, and what can I do? And infinite banking is the solution. It is it's an answer. It doesn't mean it's the only thing you could do, but it's what I recommend, and that's what Doug and I both do. So
Yeah, absolutely. And we hope that this was somewhat educated. I didn't even know what provisional income calculation was like until a few years ago, right? I wasn't aware that they taxed Social Security payments. I heard that, I was like, what? That can't be right.
yeah, but
It's
what's interesting is the age, as you said, you're under 40.
yeah,
There's people that actually get to retirement and just find out what you've already found out. They don't even know it until it's time to start looking at and then doing their taxes every year and go, oh my gosh, they're actually
right.
going to take some of this because I still need to work because I need more cash flow. I need more income. And then they find out. And it's too late. I mean, in that sense, it's
Right.
like, we're trying so hard to spread the word, right? That there is a way to protect yourself and a way out.
Yes.
But you can't be looking at it and going, "Well, I'm thinking this might be a scam." You are being scammed every which way but Tuesday, and people aren't really getting it. They're thinking the next thing is the scam. No, you're in the middle of the scam.
Yes, well said. Yeah, and there is time, right? I mean, I'm in the process of trying to move, it's not like an overnight thing, but of trying to move as much of my liquid assets as I can into whole life insurance, because I want to get to the point where, just like you said, I'm not getting to points later in my life and worrying about provisional income and future tax rates and blah 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 blah. Like I just want to be there and do whatever I want with it and have nobody interfere with my business. Simple as
Yeah,
that.
yeah, you're not living on hope anymore. Like people
Right.
still like when they get into this retirement period of their lives, they're just hoping that everything works out. Just like they've
Yes.
been hoping their whole lives while they were saving and am I going to have enough? So can I retire at 62 or 65 or 45 or whatever? And it's a bunch of hope as opposed to having a lot more no, and I know this is going to be okay. I put it into this vehicle and I can see that it is going to be really good. And yeah, so
Love it, John.
same, Doug. Yep. All right, everyone, thanks for listening. Thanks, Doug. This was a great topic, and we'll touch upon it, I'm sure, more because it's a big deal. It's a real big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal. So, yeah, thanks for chatting with me about this, John. I knew you wouldn't mind talking about this.
Yeah, it hits home
Yeah.
with family and myself, and yeah,
Well,
no
yeah,
matter
John and
what.
I have had many conversations about this offline, and it gets us like amped up because it's just not right. It's not right, and we like that we can provide people with what we think is probably, as far as I've found so far, the best solution to this. So yeah,
I agree.
good
I
stuff.
agree. All
All
right.
right, until
All
next
right.
time.
Okay, sounds great. I look forward to it.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the ABCs of IBC.
If you enjoyed listening, please hit subscribe and leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen. It really helps. See you next week.
Bye.